Masechet Yevamot Daf Samech Daled, a fantastic mix of halacha and agadah today. And we begin with the Mishnah. Nasa isha v'shaha ima 10 shanim v'lo yaleda eno rashai lebatel. If a man is married to a woman and waits for 10 years and still they do not have a child, he is not allowed to put off and neglect the mitzvah of having children. Instead, gersha mutet linaseh le'acher. He must divorce her and marry another woman so that he can fulfill peru urvu. If and when he does divorce her, she is permitted to marry somebody else, because who said that she is the infertile one? Maybe he's the one that has an infertility problem. So she'll go marry someone else, and maybe she'll be able to have children with the second man. We don't say that, we don't assume that she's the source of the infertility. And then if she's with that second man, the second man can be with her for 10 years to wait. Sometimes people don't conceive right away. It may take time. And in all these cases, if the woman has a miscarriage, then that starts the count again, the 10 years, because now that happens, okay, so it's possible she can get pregnant. Didn't work that time, but now you have an extension of 10 years from the miscarriage before one would have to go and find another wife. All right, that's the Mishnah. Tenora bana nasa isha v'shaha ima 10 shanim v'lo yalda. Yosivi ten kituba shema lo zacha libanot mimena. A baraita that supports the Mishnah. It says if a man is married to a woman and they wait 10 years and they still cannot conceive a child, he must divorce her and pay the ketuvah. The idea here is that if we know for sure it's she has the infertility problem, then he would not have to pay the ketuvah. This was part of the deal. He wanted to have children with her, so this is kind of like a mekach ta'ut, and she doesn't get it. But if it's he has the infertility problem, then he does have to pay the ketuvah. She is totally fine, and so in this case, we don't know who has the fertility problem, and therefore he does have to pay the ketubah, because maybe he is the one that did not merit to have children with her. Maybe it was some sin or problem that he did, moral or physical, a problem that's preventing him from having the child, and therefore it's not her fault. She deserves the ketubah. This idea that 10 years is the maximum, and then after that, maximum that we wait to conceive a child, there's no proof for this from the Torah, but there is a hint in the story regarding Avraham. Avraham, number one, he lived in Ur Kasdim, and then he moved to Eretz Yisrael, and with Sarai. So he was married to Sarai even before he moved. But once he moved, that started a clock 10 years. Actually, he went to Mitzrayim in the meantime, so this may we start counting from after he came back from Mitzrayim. Point is, this pasuk says, after 10 years of dwelling in Eretz Canaan, only then Avraham took Hagar and had a child with her upon Sarai's suggestion. So you see that he waited 10 years to try to conceive with Sarai. When that didn't work, only after 10 years, then he took another wife. So that's where we get to 10 years. We learned something else from that. We also learned that anytime they are dwelling outside of the land of Israel does not count in the 10 years. So in other words, this whole halacha that you wait 10 years and then you have to find another wife, that only applies in the land of Israel. There's something really interesting here, maybe the kind of beracha of the land of Israel that leads to fruitfulness. Maybe the idea that peru urvu, that very mitzvah, is inherently connected with the land of Israel. Maybe it's mishaneh makom, mishaneh mazal. When you move to a new place, then you get better luck. Okay, whatever it is, the time that Avraham and Sarai spent before they came to Israel and out in Egypt, that does not count within the 10 years. Lefichach, chalahu o shechaltahi, o shenehem chabushim bet asurim, and olin lo min haminyan. And we learn a more general rule from this, that if a man is sick, or the wife is sick, or both of them are, or one of them is in jail, in all whatever case, and there's an outside reason that we can attribute to why they cannot have a child. All right, if one of them was in jail, Tosef Tahir adds, if one was away on a trip, so they couldn't possibly be together to conceive. So if we know a specific reason why, then that doesn't count either, because that doesn't show that they have an infertility problem. They just were unable, because of disease or because of physical separation, to not have a child. So you only start counting from when it is possible. And so being outside the land of Israel is somehow equated with a separate reason why maybe the merit of being in Israel is what will allow the couple to have a child. Amar le Rava Rav Nachman velelef mi Yitzchak dichtiv ahi Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto et Rivka. Rava asks, hold on, if you're looking for a biblical precedent, we can learn from Yitzchak. So it says Yitzchak was 40 years old when he married Rivka. Uchtiv Yitzchak ben 60 shana beledet otam. And there also there was fertility problems, and it was not until 20 years later that Yitzchak and Rivka had their twin boys. So you see that he waited 20 years. So we should learn from here that the maximum amount to wait is not 10 years, but maybe 20 years. All right, good question. The answer is Amar le Yitzchak akur haya. No, in that case, we know that Yitzchak was the one that had the infertility issue. Pasuk doesn't say anything about this. We're going to derive this in a few minutes. But so because it was him, therefore, there's no point in him taking another wife, because he is not fertile. So he's going to be infertile with a second wife also. That's why he was able to remain married to Yitzchak. All right. So now that we explain that pasuk away, we go back to Avraham. Yachi Avraham nami akur haya. We're going to see in a minute that Avraham, also there's a tradition that he was the one that was infertile. And so then we couldn't learn from Abraham either that there's 10 years, because maybe it's less. And Abraham stayed with Sarai only because he knew that he himself was infertile. So there would be no point in taking someone else. So you know what? Forget this line of reasoning. We say that's not the reason that we're rejecting the pasuk from Yitzchak. Not because Abraham or Yitzchak are infertile. Forget that. Rather, there's a different reason altogether why the Pesukim in Bereshit go out of their way to tell us the dates of Yitzchak, that he was 40 years old and then 60 years old. It wasn't to teach us this law, for something else. How do we know? In a different context, Rabbi Chia asks, why does the Torah tell us the dates of Ishmael at the time of his death? Why do we care? He's not the one that's going to continue the Berit. Why does it matter how old he was? And the answer there is that no, the Torah only gives the dates of Ishmael to help you calculate the key important dates during Yaakov's life. That's all, but not because of his own life. So that's why they're there. So the point here is that there are certain dates that are given because we need to know them for other reasons. So too here with Yitzchak, the Torah gives us these dates regarding Yitzchak got married and when he had a child, and then therefore when Yaakov was born, in order so that we can calculate and correlate key dates in the life of Yitzchak and the life of Yaakov. That's why these dates are there, and not to teach us anything about the laws of infertility. Okay, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. So we're back. So therefore we can come back to the proof from Avraham Avinu. Yes, that is in fact at least a hint, if not a proof. Rabbi Yitzchak Avinu. I like how Rabbi Yitzchak is teaching us something about Yitzchak. Akur haya, and here's what we just mentioned, that in fact Yitzchak he was sterile. Shene'eman ve'ye'atar Yitzchak laHashem lenochach ishto al ishto lo ne'emar ela lenochach melamed sheshenehem akurim hayu. Since the pasuk says that Yitzchak prayed to Hashem lenochach. So ishto doesn't say regarding his wife, and if it said al ishto, that would mean that his wife is infertile. But it doesn't say that. It says lenochach, meaning corresponding to. Corresponding to teaches us that both Yitzchak and Rivka both were infertile, and that's why he was praying on behalf of both of them. They were each praying on behalf of both of them. If that's true, then in the continuation where it says that Hashem responded and answered him, should have said vayater lahem, not Hashem accepted the prayer of Yitzchak, but rather it should say Hashem responded on behalf of both of them, if in fact both of them were infertile. So the answer is lefi she'eno domeh tefillat tzaddik ben tzaddik letefillat tzaddik ben rasha. Because yes, even though both Yitzchak and Rivka were praying together, corresponding to each other, and they were both praying on behalf of themselves and each other. Yes, but whose prayer was primarily answered? It was Yitzchak's, not Rivka's, because Yitzchak was a tzaddik, the son of a tzaddik, son of Abraham, whereas Rivka, although she was a tzaddiket, she was the daughter of Laban, and therefore she did not have the merit of her father behind her. And so that's why it says Vayater lo, but in fact both Yitzchak and Rivka were infertile. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, mipnei ma hayu abotenu akurim. Why? How come so many of the four fathers here? It says four mothers too, but based on what we just said, four fathers as well. Why were so many of them infertile? Mipnei hakadosh baruch hu mitaveh litfilatan shel tzadikim. Because God loves the prayers of the righteous people, and so therefore He made them infertile so that they would be distressed and they would cry out and pray before God, and God would love their prayer. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, lama nimshal tifilatan shel tzadikim ke'ayeter. מה היתר זה מהפכת תבואה ממקום למקום, כך תפילתן של צדיקים מהפכת מידותיו של הקדוש ברוך הוא ממידת רגזנות למידת רחמנות. And further up, following on that, how come the prayers of the righteous people are like an ayater, since it says the unusual verb vayater, to entreat, happens to be the same word as an eted, a pitchfork, as you see here, this farmer gathering up hay and flipping it over with a pitchfork, because the prayers of tzaddikim act like a pitchfork, and they, just like a pitchfork moves the grain from one place to another, so to the prayers of righteous people turn over the attributes of God from anger to mercy. That's how powerful they are. And so they were the Avot were inflicted with infertility problems so that they would be able to pray. Okay, I think we have to explain a little further that it's not that God just loves being prayed to and people begging things of Him, but rather there is a benefit to the human beings themselves. When something comes easy, you don't appreciate it as much as when it's difficult, and you recognize that this is a great kindness, a great miracle from God's mercy, and so that feeling of dependence and humility and gratitude is enhanced when something is withheld and you have to pray for it. Also, because they are the avot and the mahot of the nation, these I think their struggles represent the kol hatchalot kashot, the many times in the future of the Jewish nation when it was not clear how would we have continuity, how would we go on. It seemed that the nation itself, in exile, in different problems, was infertile and would not be able to have continuity with the next generation. And so that may be another explanation of Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, to always have hope and faith and cry out in prayer, because prayer is good even when things look bleak. All right, Amar Rabbi Ameh, Abraham v'Sarah tumtumin ayu shene'emar habitu el sur חוסבתם ואל מקבת בור נוקרתם וכתיב הביטו אל אברהם אביכם ואל שרה תחוללכם. Abraham and Sarai were both born as tumtumin, meaning someone whose sexual organs are concealed over by a membrane and you cannot tell what gender they are. And we learn this from Pasuk in Yeshaya. Yeshaya is telling the people, don't lose faith and don't lose hope. You should go look back at the rock from which you were hewn, and look back to the hole of a pit from which you were dug, and that is an analogy to looking back to Abraham and Sarah. So the point of Yeshaya is, don't be upset. The point that I just said, right? Don't lack faith. Look at Abraham and Sarai, how they were barren for a long time, and then they have children. And even though there were only two people, they gave birth to many, many nations, right? So too, even if we are in exile and dwindling and have no hope, right? We look back and we are inspired by Abraham and Sarai. Now, Yeshaya, in saying that, uses an analogy of a stone cutter, someone who's hewing stone out of a rock, and that's your source, right? Where does this come from? It comes from the source back in the quarry from which you got some precious rock. So the Midrash on this says, we're going to compare Avraham and Sarai, how Hashem helped them, to a stone cutter or a sculptor. And so the point is that Avraham and Sarai in their privates were smoothed over and didn't have any apparent gender until Hashem came and hewn and carved out for Avraham a male member, and for Sarai a hole, a pit, a female genitalia, and then after that they went from being tumtum to being fertile. So this is really fascinating midrash, and this whole idea that each of the avot and imahot has had these handicaps and deformities is actually quite inspiring today, when so many people have various different types of handicaps and deformities. This is a nice source to say even our greatest patriarchs and matriarchs had these same problems, and in fact that is in many ways what made them great in the first place. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Abu, Sara imenu ailonit haya, shene'emar vati Sarai akara en la valad, afilu bet valad en la. So furthermore, not only was she tumtum and she was infertile, she actually was ailonit, meaning a woman who never developed and therefore cannot possibly have children. Noting the fact that it says two things: akara, she's infertile, and en la valad, and she has no child. Why do you have to add en la valad? So we learn from here that she did not even have a womb, right? So like zero possibility. It wasn't just a small, it was a major physiological problem that she had, and nevertheless she was able to overcome it. Amar Rav Yehuda bered Rav Shemuel bar Shelat mishmei de Rav lo shanu ela badarot harishonim. Okay, now back to the halacha of the Mishnah that says you need a man should wait 10 years, but after that, then he has to find another wife. That is only true, Rav teaches us, in the early generations. Back in those times, they lived a very long time. People lived past 140 plus years. So then, in terms of ratio, made sense. Okay, you have 10 years, you can wait. אבל בדורות האחרונים ששונותיהן מועטות, 2 שנים ומכסה כנגד 3 עיבורים. But in later generations, where an average lifespan, according to David HaMelech in Tehillim, is 70 years, ועם בגבורות 80 שנה, right? So generally 70 years. So you can't wait 10 years before conceiving. By that time, person's a large part of their life will be gone. So for the early generations, when they lived long, they could wait 10 years. But nowadays, 2.5 years. Why 2.5 years? 3 periods of pregnancy. Pregnancy 9 months, but we'll add another month for conceiving before that. So 10 times 3 is 30. That's 30 months, that's 2.5 years. In other words, try for 3 cycles, and if after 3 strikes, that's it, then you're out, and then he needs to try with a different wife. Rabba Amar Rab Nachman Shalosh Shanim Keneged Shalosh Pekidot. Rabba says, no, not 2.5 years, 3 years. Why 3 years? Because if each year is a time of visitation or remembrance. On Rosh Hashanah, a time of new beginnings, the Midrash calculates and says that's when Sarah, Rachel, and Chana, all the infertile matriarchs, they were all remembered. They were visited by God, and then they were able to get pregnant on those dates. So therefore, we should wait 3 full years, and not 2.5, so that we have a chance that this woman, if she's the one that's infertile, so she will be able to be remembered, be visited, and conceive. Amar Rabba, Rabba, however, says, no, we rejects these, not 2.5 years, not 3 years. Rather, he supports the Mishnah, 10 years. After all, who composed the Mishnah? It was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Notice it says the word taken. It doesn't say katav. He didn't write it. He didn't write it down because it was oral. He also didn't compose it all from nothing, but rather taken. He established its authority, established the correct and proper text of it, and he established its authority that this Mishnah, in other words, he canonized the Mishnah. Okay, who did that? It was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And when did the lifespans of people diminish? It was back in the time of David HaMelech, right? In Tehillim, the average lifespan is 70 years. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is living way after 1200 years after David HaMelech. So we should apply the law of the Mishnah, which is the law that applied even then to the shorter regular lifespans that we have today. And so therefore the Mishnah is authoritative, and even though we learned from Avraham a hint that of 10 years, and yeah, if you take that as the source, you could say, oh, Avraham lived a much longer life compared to us. But remember, that source from Avraham was only a hint, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, knew that pasuk, and nevertheless said 10 years, and that's the law for now at regular time. Now regarding that Baraita that we said that he has to pay after 10 years, if they don't conceive, he has to pay the ketuvah, because maybe he's the one that did not merit to have a child with her, and maybe he has the infertility problem. Okay, now we ask, wait a second, but maybe she's the one that did not merit, and she's the one. So let her prove otherwise. Otherwise, so we say, Ihi kevan delo mepakeda peryavribya la mi'ansha. No, the woman is not commanded in Pru'urvu. The mitzvah of Pru'urvu is upon the man and not the wife. And therefore, if someone would be deserving of a punishment of not having a merit of fulfilling the mitzvah of Pru'urvu, it would be the man, the husband, and therefore we assume, without knowing any further information, we assume that the husband is the source of the infertility problem and not her, and therefore he has to pay her the ketubah. Good. Ini, hold on. Is this true? Veha amru le Rabbanan Rabbi Abba bar Zavda nesiv itita ve'olid bene. V'amar lehu izakai avuli mekamaita. Here we have a story about the rabbis who came to Rabbi Abba bar Zavda, and they said, look, you're married for 10 years and you don't have a child, so you should go marry another wife and have a child. And Rabbi Abba responded to them, if I am meritorious, then I'll have a child from my first wife. And so what's the difference? It's not going to help if I go and marry a second wife. What we see from here is a challenge to our very Mishnah. As said, after 10 years, one must go and find another wife. And here we have Rabbi Abba who says, no, it's based on merit, and therefore I may as well stay married to this one. And so we answer, Hatam dahui kamidche lehu l'Rabbanan. No, in this case, Rabbi Abba was only pushing off the rabbis with a simple answer because he knew that it was he was the one that was sterile, and therefore him marrying another woman, it was not going to help. And so that's why he gave this answer that, oh no, it's just based on merit and I could stay with my first wife, because he knew that about himself. But in fact, in a case where we don't know for sure who is the one that has the infertility problem, then yes, you would have to go and find a second wife. All right. Now, the Rabbi Abba, why was he sterile, and how did he know that? What happened to him? The Rabbi Abba bar Zavda yakar mipirkei de Rav Huna. He became sterile on account of the long lectures that Rav Huna used to give, as we saw on the previous daf. And now we see even more rabbis that had the same situation. Rav Yidal yakar mipirkei de Rav Huna. Rabbi Achelbo yakar mipirkei de Rav Huna. Rav Sheshat, that's what we saw yesterday, yakar mipirkei de Rav Huna. So these three other sages also became impotent because they sat in the long lectures of Rav Huna. Rav Aha bar Yaakov ahadete suschinta talyuhu be'arza de be'rav unfak mine kehusa yarka. Rav Yaakov, however, even though he had a similar situation and problem, nevertheless, this disease that he had, he resolved. They suspended him from a cedar column in the middle of a study hall, and out of him some substance that was green as a leaf emerged, and then he was healed. That was something that was stopping him up, and so he was able to be healed from this disease that is similar to whatever these other sages had. And it's not only these four sages above, but in fact there were 60 elders that were all present, and they all became impotent because they attended Rav Huna's shiurim. Except for me, Rav Acha says, because I followed the wisdom in Koheles' wisdom preserves life. I was able to figure out a way around it, either by doing the suspending trick. By doing this, he's the one that was suspended, so he was able to find a resolution, but these other 60 sages did not. Okay, so just one word about this. The usual explanation is that the shiurim were very long and they had to go to the bathroom, but they held it in out of respect, not to interrupt and miss out on the shiur, and they became impotent because of that. Problem with that is that, the Talmud elsewhere says one is not allowed to hold it in, knows the dangers of such things, and so it doesn't make sense that they would do this. And furthermore, the Talmud never says that it was on account of their length and the people not being able to go to the bathroom. That is not mentioned in the text of the Talmud. So if I could offer a beginning of a suggestion, which is perhaps it's the deep study of Torah itself, as we see in the famous story about Rabbi Yochanan, who was bathing in Eshakish, who was at that time was a gladiator, and he saw Rabbi Yochanan and jumped into the river to pursue him because he looked so beautiful. And then they had a conversation, and he said, Rabbi Yochanan said, "Listen, I have a sister who's more beautiful than me, and if you accept upon yourself to study Torah, I will give her to you in marriage." And he does. Shakish agrees to devote himself to Torah instead of being a gladiator. Okay, he had jumped across the river to get to Rabbi Yochanan, but now he wanted to jump back out of the river, but he was unable to return. The idea here is that that physical strength that he had, virility as a gladiator, now that he accepts upon himself the responsibility to study Torah, all that energy goes into his intellectual, spiritual means, and then his physical strength is deprived. So this may be a hint of the idea that these lectures of Rav Huna were so powerful, so intellectually and spiritually stimulating on a high level, that it caused the students Number one, maybe they had to stay very late and weren't with their wives. Maybe they studied many years and so weren't with their wives. Or in general, some kind of correlation here, maybe on a more metaphorical level, between physical strength and spiritual, intellectual strength of studying Torah. Besides the fact that other stories about rabbis going away to learn for a long time and either not having children or not bringing up their children because they're away, and they're therefore not attending and teaching their children as much as they would if they were around and not studying Torah for such lengths of time. So I think that this may be connected to that network of other agadot and relationships. Okay, Gersha Muteret. So the Mishnah said that if a woman gets divorced because she did not have a child with her husband for 10 years and he divorces her, she is permitted to go and marry another person, because who knows, maybe she'll have better luck, maybe he was the one that was not fertile, or maybe just their chemistry literally didn't produce a child, and so she'll marry someone else. So the Mishnah only mentions one more marriage, so we say sheni'in shelishi la. But if she's 10 years with husband one, another 10 years with husband two, then that's it. She cannot move on to a third husband, because after 2 times, we assume that's it, that she is the one that's not fertile, and so we don't want to waste husband's time to being with her after that. Okay, Matnitin Maneh Rebihi. Who was the author of this Mishnah? It must be Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Why? The Tanya. Mala Harishon Umet, Sheni Umet, Shilishi, Lo Tamol Divrei Rabbi. We're comparing a wife who doesn't have children for 10 years with a child, an infant, who dies on account of getting a Brit Milah. They have some kind of a disease, a blood clotting issue. And so if someone has a boy and does Brit Milah and it dies, and then he has a second boy, or that one also dies, the third one, halacha is, do not give it a Brit Milah. It does not have to get a Brit Milah because it's too dangerous. And that's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. You see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says only 2 times do you try, and that's it. 2 strikes and then you're out. And same thing, he would be the author of our Mishnah that says a woman gets 2 chances to be married for 10 years, and that's it. There is no third chance. Even though there's another opinion, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer shilishi tamul, Rebi'i lo tamul. He's the one, he says 3 strikes. Only after 3 strikes, then you're out. Right, even the third child must be circumcised, and if that one dies too, then you know, okay, there's a repeated pattern here. It takes 3 to make a pattern, not 2. So our Mishnah would follow to be. Okay, that makes sense. However, even though we just quoted one baraita, there is another baraita that has the same opinions, but the attributions are switched, and it's Rabbi that is the one that says 3 times, and Rabbi Rashbag that says 2 times. So Heminayu acharinita. Which of these 2 baraitot is the latest one? We assume the latest one is the one that fixed the problem of the wrong attributions that were in the other one. But between this baraita and the opposite one, which one is the correct version? So let's see if we can figure that out. Tashema damar bichia bar Abba amar bi Yochanan maase barba chayot besipori shemala rishona umet sheniya umet shelishit umet rebi'it bad lifnei Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel amar la al tamuli. We have a case here also about Brit Milah, but this one is not about children of the same parents, but rather sisters. 4 sisters that lived in Sipori. One of them had a boy, did circumcision, and it died. The second sister had a boy, did circumcision, and it died. Then a third one had a boy, and it died. Then the fourth, they brought it to Rashbag, and he said, okay, don't do circumcision anymore. So this is a case of different parents. Okay, nevertheless, we see that Rashbag is here the one that says you're allowed 3 times, 3 strikes, and only after that you're out, which would support this version of the Baraita here, that Rashbag is the one that is that says 3 strikes and then you're out. Okay, so this looks like a good proof, except Vidilma Iyatya Shilishit Nameava Marle. Maybe it just happened to be in that case that they did Brit Milah on 3 of the sons already, and the question was about the 4th. It just happened to be. But maybe if they brought the 3rd one, Rashbag would also say that, oh no, only don't even do Brit Milah on the 3rd one, had he been asked. So that's just could be the case. It's not necessarily a proof. But then we say, no, it is a proof. Because otherwise, why would Rabbi Chiya bring the story in the first place if it wasn't legally significant to say that he only said, no, don't circumcise the 4th child? That means he would have said, yes, circumcise the 3rd child, right? If he would have said no to the 3rd, then there's nothing. He's not this. Then it's not an interesting story. Why would it be Chaya bother telling it in the first place? So he says, actually, there is a reason. Maybe he wants to teach us that sisters also establish a presumption, even though they were from different mothers. Nevertheless, we say, well, if one of the sisters has this is a good proof that the rabbis knew something about hereditary diseases, that even though they are from different mothers, nevertheless, if the first one died, the second one's son died, then, so this story is teaching us that even if it's not the same mother for each one, even if it's different mothers, nevertheless, we have to take that into account. So that's why he was saying the story. The story only teaches that even though each child is from different parents, it's obviously must be different fathers because they're all sisters, so it couldn't be the same father. Even though they're all different parents and they died because the mothers are related, so this might be hereditary disease, and we do take that into account and exempt after a series. But this Baraita does not teach us anything necessarily about the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, and therefore we are left unresolved. We don't know which version of the Baraita is which. Okay. Based on this story, however, we do learn a different law. Amarava hashtadamat achiot mechazekot lo yisa adam isha lo mimishpachat nichpin lo mishpachat mesoraim vehu ditchazak telata zimnehem. Now that we know that sisters establish a hazakah, that there may be a disease that is carried in this entire family, and that's why each of their sons died. Therefore, one also should not marry a woman who has within her family epileptics or lepers or any other kind of hereditary disease. Because if you see that already two members of the family or 3 members of the family, that's if it's 3, right? If you have 3 members of the family all have this disease, and then you should not marry another of a sister, a woman from that family, because there's a presumption that she also may have that disease. Okay, my habi Allah. Okay, back to our original question. Is it 2 strikes or 3 strikes? What is the halacha regarding the waiting 10 years and related, and also Brit Milah? Ki ata Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef amar, ubada hava kamed Rabbi Yochanan b'kenishtat ma'on b'yom kippurim shachal liot b'Shabbat. In fact, there was such a case that came before Rabbi Yochanan in his Bet Knesset in the city of Ma'on, and it was Yom Kippur and Shabbat. So that's a double whammy that you would not be allowed to cause a wound on such a day, if not that it was a valid Brit Milah. Umala rishona umet sheniya umet shlishit ba lefanav amar la lechi muli. And there was such a case of sisters that came, and the first sister came, I guess they all had children on the very same day, or maybe on other years, but it was all Yom Kippur and Shabbat. He did the first circumcision and the baby died. The second one and the baby died, and the third one then came to Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe it was just the third one that happened on Yom Kippur of Shabbat, and they asked him, what should we do? And he said, go do the Brit Milah anyway. If that means there is a mitzvah to do Brit Milah, that you can override Shabbat and Yom Kippur. And so you see that Rabbi Yochanan followed the opinion that says 3 strikes, and only after that you are out. Even the third baby, we do not presume will have a genetic problem from these various sisters. And so that's it. We see it's 3. Amar le Abaye, Hazeh de kasharet isura v'sakanta. Abaye told Rav Yitzchak, the one who transmitted this story to us, and he says, go and check that go and check your source to make sure that you got the story exactly correctly, because you are permitting, this is a precedent that will permit in the future, not only in Isura, to do it, to violate, override Shabbat and or Yom Kippur, to do Brit Milah, but also danger of the third baby. This is a medical situation as well. So make sure that you got this right, and in the future we will should do Brit Milah even after two children die. That yes, we should still go ahead. It's not a chazakah after 2, only after 3. Okay, Samach ale Abaye. Now Abaye is the one here that was skeptical and wanted Rav Yitzchak to make sure. Nevertheless, Abaye himself followed the opinion that said only after 3 strikes. V'azal nesaba lechoma berata de'isi bered de Rav Yitzchak bered de Rav Yehuda. And he married this woman named Choma. It lists her lineage. Dinaspa de Chaba de Pumpedita Ushchiv. This Choma, she had been married to a man named Rehaba, who was from Pumbedita. He died while being married to her. Then she went and she married Rav Yitzchak bered Rabba bar Hana Ushchib, and that second husband also died, and Abaye nevertheless went and married her. And you know what happened? Abaye also died while married to her. Okay, it doesn't say how long they were married, but he took his life into his own hands and followed the lenient ruling that he heard here from Rav Yitzchak based on Rabbi Yochanan, and he took his life into his own hands by doing that. Amar Rava Umika de'aved ubada b'nafsheh ki hai. Rava was astonished that his colleague Abaye should follow this leniency. Right? Is there such a person that follows an actual case himself like this and puts himself in danger? Va'iyuda Amar, Abaye himself was the one that had been skeptical, as we saw above, and he said in general that Avin de Samcha, he would trust something that Avin said. Yitzchak Somaka la bar Samcha. But Yitzchak, the red, this is a nickname for Yitzchak bar Yosef, this one, the one who told the story about Rabbi Yochanan. He said that this Yitzchak, he's not reliable. Why? Avin yeshno b'chazara. Yitzchak Somaka no b'chazara. Avin, he would always go back and review what he learned, and he would go back and make sure to check if that story was correct. Did Rabbi Yochanan change his mind? Did we get the right version? Yitzchak Somaka, however, did not go back and review and double check his rurlings. That's what Abaye used to say. So it's really surprising that Abaye actually followed this. Furthermore, even if they see he said that story regarding Brit Milah that it's only after the 3rd strike, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you would apply that also to a case of marriage when you have this dangerous wife. Maybe you would not apply it in the case of Brit Milah, where it's a mitzvah. Otherwise, you can't do Brit Milah. So maybe in that case, we'll say, only after 3. But with marriage, go marry somebody else. Why would you put yourself in danger? Maybe we wouldn't say it. Okay, we answered the second point. I said, in fact, we apply the same rule to both cases. If a person was married to one woman and he died, and then she married a second one, he died, so the third man should not marry her. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rashbag says, no, she can get married 3 times, even to the 3rd husband is fine. It's only after 3 strikes, then we say this is a dangerous woman, and the 4th should not marry her. Okay, what we see here is that the very same machloket between the Rabbi and Rashbag that applied to the previous cases applies here also. So, in fact, if you follow the more lenient opinions after 3 strikes regarding Brit Milah, then you'll also follow the lenient opinion regarding marrying a dangerous woman. Okay, so that point is rejected. Still surprising that Abaye followed it, even though he was suspect of Rabbi Yitzchak's traditions. Okay, Bishlam Agabe Milah. Now let's get into the reason for it. We understand regarding Brit Milah, There are some families that their blood is thin, it doesn't clot well. And then if you go and do a brit milah, make a cut, they will bleed and will not heal. So it makes sense that that would be a hereditary disease, as in fact it is. Whereas other families, they have thicker blood and their blood clots okay. So this makes sense that this would be hereditary. Ela nisuin ma'itama. But regarding the death of these husbands, what does that have to do with another? I mean, we're not suspecting that this wife is actually a killer wife and she's murdering one husband after the other, right? We're not talking about that. So what kind of problem would this be? אמר להם רב מרדכי לרב השחי אמר רבי מימי מהגרוניה משמד רב הונא מעיין גורם רב השי אמר מזל גורם. So in fact we have two opinions to answer this. Rav Huna says ma'ayan, it's her spring, a reference to her privates. In other words, this is an STD, and that's why it's a deadly, lethal one. So anyone who has relations with her will acquire this disease and die. So yes, it is in fact therefore a natural biological reason for this. Rav Ashi says no, it's a metaphysical one. It's luck. The constellation that she's born under, astrologically, she is just a bad luck woman, and anyone married to her will have this problem. My benai, what will be a practical difference between those two opinions? Ika benai de ersa umit iname nafal medikla umit. There would be a difference if someone only did kiddushin with her, so they never had bi'ah. And therefore, if it was an STD problem, then you wouldn't count that. He's not called one of the guys who dies. Or if he happened to fall off a palm tree and died, then also that's not because of an STD that he fell off out of a tree. But both of these could be reasons for him to die if it's because of her bad luck, that because he is engaged to her, or married, but he died from falling off a tree, not from some other type of disease. So then we would count that guy as one of the guys that would create a series. So if someone was married to 2 or 3 men and only kiddushin, or they all died from some violent death, according to the one that says mazal, then no one else should marry her. Bad luck. But according to the one who says that's an STD, these people never got an STD. It was not because of bi'ah, and so she next person would be permitted to marry her. אמר לרב יוסף ברד רבה לרבה בעי מיניה מרב יוסף הלכה כרבי ואמר לי אין. So a great story here. Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, told Rava, says, I once asked Rav Yosef, does the halacha follow Rabbi that says only 2 times? That's what we're establishing after all that. The Rabbi is the one, as we said in the first baraita, who says 2 strikes only. And he says, yes, halacha is like Rabbi. And then, I don't know, for some reason he asked further, halacha keraban Shimon ben Gamliel, v'amar li'in. Okay, is the halacha like Rashbag after 3 strikes? And he said, yes. So, what was he mocking me? Right? He was making fun of me. He says yes to everything. You're right, and you're right. How could they both be right? You're right too. Right? What kind of, was this a joke? Amale lo sitamehi ufashitle. So Rava explained it to him, to his son. He says, no, the problem is we have various anonymous Mishnayot, and some of them follow Rabbi, some of them follow Rashbag, depending on the issue at hand. And so, that's why he said, yes, sometimes we follow Halacha follows Rabbi, sometimes Halacha follows Rashbag. And now he explained it to him. Which cases do we follow? Which? Nisuinu malkuyot kerebi, vesatot veshoramuad keraban Shimon ben Gamliel. When it comes to marriage and giving lashes, we have only a precedent of 2, like Rabbi. Whereas regarding setting patterns for a nidah, and when an ox is considered a forewarned ox, there we follow the pattern after 3 times, like Rashbag. Let's explain each case. Nisuin hadamaran. Nisuin, we already talked about. If you have this killer woman, then after only 2 times, the 3rd one should not marry her. Malkuyot, lashes, ditnan, mishalaka veshana, betin konsinoto lechipa. We have, this is a Mishnah. that says if someone was given lashes for doing some kind of sin, and then he went and did that very same sin again, and now this time Bet Din says what, a repeat offender. So if he does that twice, we give him lashes again. After that, he only gets 2 chances. If he does it a third time, he doesn't get lashes, but rather we put him into a prison. And they feed him barley, and then they wait till the barley expands. He drinks some water, and then he explodes from the inside. So we can't give him capital punishment directly and hang him or anything, because he didn't do something that is worthy of a capital punishment. But instead, we use this indirect capital punishment because we know if we just give him lashes again, he's just gonna do it again. And so for that, we are strict and say we only allow lashes 2 times, third time out. Okay, visatot detanan en ha'isha kobat laveset ad shetikbe'ayna 3 pe'amim. Okay, regarding patterns for nida, so here is also a mishnah, but now we follow the shpag that says 3 times. A woman establishes her pattern only after 3 times. In other words, let's say she becomes nida on the 5th of this month, and the 5th of the next month, and the 5th of the month after that. Now you see she has a regular pattern, and therefore she will expect to become nida on the 5th month every month after that, and because of that, during that time period, she has to refrain from being with her husband, because she can expect that she'll become teme'ah. And similarly, once you establish a pattern, you can only undo the pattern if 3 months in a row she does not become nida on the 5th. And so after 3 months of not, then that erases the previous pattern. So in these cases, you need 3 and then only the one after that. ושור המועד דתנן, אין השור נעשה מועד עד שיעידו בו 3 פעמים. Also regarding an ox, if it gores once, twice, even 3 times, even after 2 times, is called a shor tam. And so when it gores on the 3rd time, so you don't have to pay half still. Only after it gores 3 times, if it should gore a 4th time, then it becomes a shor mu'ad. And so for those 2 laws, we follow Rashbag, and that's why indeed the halacha is both like Rabbi in 2 cases and like Rashbag in the other 2 cases. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.